In the Gospel of John, chapter 4, Jesus sat by a well in a town called Sychar in Samaria. A woman came to draw water. Jesus, weary from his journey, asked her for a drink. The woman replied, "How is it that you, though you are a Jew, are asking me for a drink, though I am a Samaritan woman?" Her words carried centuries of division, political, religious, ethnic. To understand that moment, we need to pause and trace the roots of Jewish-Samaritan animosity, the prophets sent by God, and the contested seats of worship in Jerusalem and Samaria. After Solomon's death around 930 BCE, the united monarchy split. The 10 tribes of Israel in the north rejected Rehoboam, Solomon's son, and formed their own kingdom under Jeroboam. They feared that returning to Jerusalem would undermine their independence. So Jeroboam built altars at Bethel and Dan and appointed priests loyal to him, effectively creating a parallel worship system. This deliberate political and religious break sowed the seeds of mutual contempt. During the next 2 centuries, the northern kings often led Israel into Canaanite syncretism, worshipping Yahweh alongside Baal, Asherah, and other local deities. Prophets like Elijah, Hosea, Amos, and Micah were dispatched, pleading with the northern kingdom to return to exclusive loyalty to Yahweh. Elijah confronted Ahab and Jezebel on Mount Carmel. 1 Kings 18, demonstrating that the Lord alone had power over fire. Hosea painted Israel's unfaithfulness as spiritual adultery, Hosea 1-3. Yet the northern rulers hardened their hearts. Techniques like burning children to Molech, 2 Kings 21:6, and ritual prostitution in Asherah's shrines, 2 Kings 23:7, corrupted worship. By 722 BCE, God's judgment fell. The Assyrians besieged Samaria. King Hoshea capitulated, but Sargon II carried away thousands of Israelites into exile. In their place, Assyria relocated people from Babylon, Cutha, Ava, Hamath, and Sepharvaim. 2 Kings 17:24. These settlers intermarried with the remnant Israelites. The mixture of ethnicities and religions produced a community that worshipped Yahweh alongside foreign gods, Astarte, Ashima, Nergal, and others. 2 Kings 17:29-33. Over time, this mixed community, half Israelite, half foreign, came to be called Samaritans, literally, residents of Samaria. They claimed descent from the tribes of Ephraim and Manasseh, capturing an identity that straddled Israelite lineage and pagan influence. Meanwhile, to the south, Judah endured its own struggles. It flirted with idolatry under Manasseh, 2 Chronicles chapter 33, but under kings like Hezekiah and Josiah, Judah reformed. Chronicles 29-13, 34-35. The exile of Jerusalem in 586 BCE ultimately humbled Judah. When Cyrus the Great allowed exiles to return, 538 BCE, a remnant rebuilt the temple. Ezra 1-6. That second temple was completed in 516 BCE, re-establishing Jerusalem as the center of Jewish worship. But those exiles who never returned, or who had never been taken, remained in the land alongside Samaritans. Tensions simmered. When the returning exiles under Zerubbabel and Jeshua began rebuilding the altar and laying temple foundations, Ezra 3, the Samaritans offered to help, Ezra 4:1-2. But Zerubbabel and the priestly leaders refused. Mixing with foreign worshippers would taint their sacred work. The Samaritans, offended and resentful, lobbied the Persian governor to halt construction. Their false letters and accusations nearly stopped the project. Ezra 4:23. Only by decree of Cyrus and Darius did the temple rise again. But that refusal cemented mutual bitterness. Jews saw Samaritans as interlopers. Samaritans saw Jews as arrogant separatists. Over the next centuries, Samaritan priests built their own temple on Mount Gerizim, just north of Shechem. Meanwhile, the restored Second Temple in Jerusalem became Judaism's focal point. Samaritans continued to sacrifice on Gerizim. John 4:20, while Jews offered sacrifices in Jerusalem. Each group accused the other of corrupting the true worship of Yahweh. Outsiders call Abraham the father, but these competing claims and separate sanctuaries created a religious chasm that Jesus would confront head-on at Jacob's well. Now picture Jesus sitting by the well, an ancient stone basin likely fashioned by Jacob centuries before. The woman approaches bearing a water jar on her shoulder. When Jesus asked for a drink, she responded, "How is it that you, though you are a Jew, are asking me for a drink, though I am a Samaritan woman?" Pause to note the layers at work. Jews and Samaritans avoided each other socially. A man of stature would not speak to an unaccompanied woman, and to be a Samaritan woman added further taboo. Yet Jesus crossed every boundary deliberately. She called Jacob our father, indicating her Samaritan identity. Samaritans trace their lineage through Jacob's grandsons, Ephraim and Manasseh, Joseph's sons, claiming direct descent. They saw themselves as the true keepers of Jacob's heritage. The very well's name, Jacob's Well, was a claim to patriarchal legitimacy. It was an ancestral marker that Samaritans revered. Jesus said, "Go, call your husband." The woman replied, "I have no husband." Jesus said, "You have spoken truthfully. You have had 5 husbands, and the one you now have is not your husband." Pause to explore 5 husbands. Some propose a symbolic reading. In 722 BCE, Samaria was repopulated by 5 distinct foreign, pagan nations. In that sense, the 5 husbands could refer to 5 pagan deities or 5 oppressor groups: Babylon, Cutha, Ava, Hamath, Sepharvaim, each marrying Israel into idolatry. 2 Kings 17:24-41. However, the woman's reaction suggests a personal revelation. In first-century Palestine, women's status was precarious. Divorce was predominantly at a husband's discretion. Remarriage happened frequently, often due to death, abandonment, or economic necessity. A woman without family support, perhaps widowed, divorced, or deserted, might be forced into remarriage or even prostitution for survival. Social stigma attached to a woman with multiple former husbands or an illicit partnership. Though Jewish law allowed levirate marriage, Deuteronomy 25:5-10, or widows to remarry, each new marriage brought shame if it occurred outside accepted norms. If her 5 husbands died, left her, or ended in divorce, she would be viewed as damaged goods, vulnerable to exploitation. Thus, Jesus' knowledge cut to the bone of her life's hardship. His precision, 5 husbands, revealed personal, intimate history, not a generic metaphor. The woman's abrupt shift from defense, "I am anem, no husband," to stunned confession, "Sir, I see that you are a prophet," underscores that he revealed details no stranger could know, and she recognized a divine insight. Stunned, she said, "Sir, I perceive that you are a prophet. Our fathers worshipped on this mountain, and you Jews say that in Jerusalem is the place where one must worship. Which is the truth?" Pause to explain Samaritan worship and not knowing what they worship. Samaritans accepted only the Pentateuch, the first 5 books of Moses, while rejecting the prophets, Nevi'im, and writings, Ketuvim. Their canon lacked Isaiah's promises of a Davidic king, Jeremiah's description of a new covenant, or Ezekiel's vision of a restored temple. They had no psalms or proverbs to guide worship. Without prophetic literature, they missed genealogies, historical retrospectives, and future messianic expectations contained in later books. Because the Samaritan Pentateuch diverged theologically, insisting on Mount Gerizim as the sole holy place, they developed a worship practice that was sincere, yet partial. They sacrificed lambs on Gerizim, observed Passover on that mountain, and kept only Torah-based feasts, unleavened bread, weeks, booths. But they lacked the fuller revelation of God's covenantal story, including the story of David establishing Jerusalem, 2 Samuel, Solomon's Temple, 1 Kings 6-8, the Babylonian exile and prophetic hope, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, the restored community under Ezra and Nehemiah, messianic prophecies of Yeshua ben David. Without these, Samaritan worshippers did not know what they worshipped in the full biblical sense. They had a remnant of truth but lacked the expanded narrative that pointed to the Messiah's coming. Jesus' words, "You worship what you do not know. We worship what we know, for salvation is from the Jews," acknowledged their partial faith and pointed to Judaism's fuller revelation, culminating in the Messiah from David's line. The woman pressed on. "I know that Messiah is coming, he who is called Christ. When he comes, he will declare all things to us." This is stunning. Despite their limited canon, Samaritans held a genuine messianic hope. Their scripture, especially Deuteronomy 18:15, "The Lord your God will raise up for you a prophet like me from among you," fostered an expectation of a restorer, or Taheb, who would come to explain God's will. Jesus answered, "I who speak to you am he." Pause to note, this is the first explicit declaration of messianic identity in John's Gospel, and it is given to a Samaritan woman, a marginalized, divorced, or possibly widowed Samaritan woman, a social outcast. The Messiah's revelation bypassed Jerusalem's elites and came first to a despised foreigner. This underscores that Jesus' mission transcended ethnic or religious boundaries. He came for the lost, the broken, the partial, and for those ready to believe. In response to her question about Gerizim versus Jerusalem, Jesus said, "Woman, believe me, an hour is coming when you will neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem worship the Father. The hour is coming, and now is, when the true worshippers will worship the Father in spirit and truth, for the Father is seeking such to worship him." Pause to examine worship in spirit and truth. At that time, Jewish worship in Jerusalem, centered on sacrifices in the Second Temple, rebuilt in 516 BCE and later expanded by Herod, 1-20 BCE AD 64. Priestly classes, Levitical singers, and ritual purity laws governed approach to God. Festival pilgrimages, Passover, weeks, booths, drew Jews from all over. Because God's presence was thought to dwell in the Holy of Holies, no one entered that innermost part except the high priest once a year. Worship involved rituals, sacrifices, prayers, washings, prescribed by the law and interpreted by scribes and Pharisees. The Jewish mind equated true worship with proper location, Zion, proper time, set feasts, and proper procedure, Levitical sacrifice. Samaritan worship on Mount Gerizim centered on an annual Passover sacrifice at a temple built on Gerizim, destroyed in 128 BCE, later rebuilt and destroyed again. Only the Pentateuch was read. There was no Levitical priesthood in the same sense, but a Samaritan priesthood traced to Aaron through Eleazar. No psalms or prophetic liturgies. Their prayers and rituals derived strictly from the Torah. Because their chosen place was Gerizim, they believed proximity to that mountain ensured God's presence. But their narrower scriptural base meant they worshipped sincerely but incompletely, without psalms of praise, without Levitical sacrifices tied to Jerusalem, without prophetic clarifications of the day of the Lord, and without Davidic hopes. Jesus' new paradigm. He declared that neither Gerizim nor Jerusalem would ultimately define worship. Spirit and truth meant worship based on inner transformation, spirit, and adherence to revealed reality, truth. The promised Paraclete, Holy Spirit, would come, John 14:16, to indwell believers, transcending physical locations. This worship would be universal, Jew or Samaritan, male or female, united by faith in the Son of God. In other words, Jesus was turning worship from external rituals anchored in geography or ethnic identity to an internal, spirit-led relationship grounded in the reality of God revealed through Christ. After this encounter, John records that many Samaritans believed in Jesus because of the woman's testimony. They invited him to stay, and he revealed himself more fully, leading to additional Samaritans professing faith. John 4:39-42. Yet tensions remained. Centuries later, Samaritan communities still endured suspicion from Jewish authorities. Even by Jesus' day, Jews called Samaritans half-breeds, John chapter 8:48, and would not enter Samaritan homes, Luke 9:52-56. The church that emerged after Pentecost also grappled with including Samaritans, Acts chapter 8:4-25, showing that Jesus' vision of worship in spirit and truth would gradually break down ethnic barriers. So here we stand. Two kingdoms, Israel and Judah, divided by politics and waged doctrinal wars over where and how to worship. Prophets sent to confront Israel's idolatry. Many perished or were ignored. Assyrian conquest, exile, and resettlement that birthed the Samaritans, descendants of mixed peoples with a Torah-only faith. Second Temple citizens in Jerusalem, rebuilding their identity under Ezra and Nehemiah, excluding Samaritans from participating. Two scrolls, the Masoretic text, refined by Jewish scribes, incorporating centuries of prophetic tradition. The Samaritan Pentateuch, preserved in Paleo-Hebrew, upholding Moses as final authority and proclaiming Gerizim as sacred. Two holy mountains, Mount Zion in Jerusalem, with its temple, priests, sacrifices, and festivals. Mount Gerizim in Samaria, with its Samaritan temple, Torah-only liturgy, and Passover feast. And yet, into that fractured landscape, the Messiah came. He met a woman at a well, a Samaritan, a social outcast, a woman of questionable marital history, showing that his mission transcended Jewish-Samaritan divisions. He unveiled the living water of the Spirit, exposed hidden sin, redefined worship, and revealed himself as the long-awaited Taheb and Messiah. In doing so, he beckoned both Jews and Samaritans, and all who thirst, to worship the Father in spirit and in truth, not on Gerizim, not in Jerusalem, but in the unified reality of his redeeming presence.